Hey there, this is Tony with The Word is the Way, and I want to kind of share with you today some scriptures, and what this brief devotion or lesson is in reference to is the idea that somehow being a conscientious objector is somehow based scripturally. And so the majority of conscientious objectors will say that, well, we're commanded in Scripture not to kill. But there's a difference in murder, which is what the commandment is referencing, and taking a life in defense of something or in combat. And as a matter of fact, if you go on into looking at Levitical law, you'll see that when a life was accidentally taken with no malice or no ill intent, there were different punishments for those things. And God even had, as the nation of Israel moved into the land of Canaan, they set up specific towns that were sanctuaries. So if someone had taken someone's life, they could escape to that town, and when they got there, they were safe from anyone that would try to exact revenge on them for taking a life, until it could be judged or set up within their system of legality for that to be looked at to determine if that life was taken with malice, intentionally or unintentionally. And so the Lord is obviously not saying that in combat taking a life is something that he's contrary to, because he used the nation of Israel to destroy evil people, and then again when the nation rebelled against him, he used neighboring countries and kingdoms, and he sent their armies to utterly destroy them and to take them into captivity. So he can't contradict himself, because that's not who God is and not what he does. And so to help emphasize this idea that conscientious objection is not biblically based nor sound, I like to reference, first of all, Exodus chapter 15, verse 3, where it reads in the New Living Translation that the Lord is a warrior, Yahweh is his name. Now in the original Greek, or correction, in the original Hebrew, the way that reads is, the Lord is a man of war. Well, obviously at this point in history, when this was written by Moses, Jesus Christ had not come to the earth, and so God was not a man, he's a spirit. So we didn't have Christ coming as the Son of God, and so clearly they're not referencing that God is a man here. But because they didn't have a word in the Hebrew like warrior, they referenced anyone who went to war or who was a soldier, have you, as a man of war. So for modern times, for you and I, a better translation of that would be the Lord is a warrior, to give us a better understanding. So they say in this song that Moses and the people of Israel are singing, they reference the Lord as a warrior, and Yahweh is his name. So if we are created in God's image and God is a warrior, when we speak of being created in his image, we're talking about his character traits of whom God is. Not that physically when you look at my face that you see God, but God's very character and his nature, who he is. He created us that way. And if a part of his nature is that he is a warrior, then why wouldn't I also be that? Why would I not represent that in some shape, form, or fashion? Now, I'm not saying that everyone would be called to service as a warrior, as a soldier or a Marine or a airman or a seaman, but for those of us that are, we are most definitely reflecting a part of his character of who God is in so doing. And I like to then go from Exodus 15 all the way over to Ephesians 5, where Paul is instructing us in Ephesians 5 verse 1 to be imitators of God. So if we're to imitate God, we're to imitate him in every aspect of his character. And a part of that aspect of his character is that he's a warrior. according to what we looked at in Exodus. So there's definitely nothing wrong with a person of faith, a follower of Christ, to imitate his Creator in the aspect that he's called to service in defense of the nation and in defense of the Constitution, and to be a warrior. You know, let's take for instance King David. The scripture says that he's a man after God's own heart, but yet he was a man of war. He was a warrior, and he fought many battles and he took many lives, and yet the scripture says that he was a man after God's own heart. Now, he wanted later on in his life to build a temple in honor of God, but God told him that he couldn't build that temple because he had blood on his hands. Well, the blood that was on his hands, from my perspective, was not the blood of being a warrior, but it was the innocent blood he had on his hands of Uriah when he had sent him to the front line to be killed to cover up his sin when he had committed adultery with Bathsheba. That's the blood I feel like the Lord is referencing, because David had taken many, many lives in combat, but he took one innocent life to cover up his sin. And so I think that's the blood that the Lord is referencing when he said he had blood on his hands and wasn't going to allow him to build that temple. And how heartbreaking that had to have been, to have a heart to want to honor God and then be told that he couldn't. But the good thing for David was that he didn't give up. He still made preparations for the building of the temple. He set aside the materials that his son Solomon would need. And so he didn't let that deter him from still trying to serve and honor the Lord as best he could. But back to the point that if the Lord is a warrior and we're created in his image, and then Paul goes on in Ephesians and tells us to be imitators of God, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with service and being a part of whatever branch of the armed services you're in and participating in activities that ultimately could take someone's life. It's not contrary to Scripture, and that's a farce. People use it as a crutch and a tool to get out of service, in my opinion. So I'm not saying that you have to serve, and I'm not saying that you have to take a life, but what I am saying is don't point your finger at the rest of us and tell us that we're not people of faith and that we don't live out the calling of Christ on our lives because we participate in those activities. But yet we provide a platform in order for you to be able to have your belief system and to practice it openly. And so rather than point your finger at you, you should actually thank us for what we've done. It's rather the Lord has done it through us. Let me restate that. The Lord's provided you that platform through our service. With that, I would only say, don't use a misinterpretation of Scripture to prevent you from serving your country. So, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to listen. God bless you. I hope that you've learned something from this little lesson. And always remember, no matter what your question is, the Word is the way.